The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Payment Vision webinar on maintaining compliance and finding financial assistance during this time of the coronavirus and our response to it. We appreciate everyone for attending. This is our first webinar for AutoScribe and Payment Vision for a while, so I want to apologize in advance if there's any technical difficulties. We'll work through these promptly, and we'll go ahead and get started now with some introductions. So just quick webinar best practices so everyone's aware. For the webinar today, administratively, you do have a section on your control console called questions. In the question spot, please, as any questions arise, paste those questions or type those questions into that section, and we will respond to those through the webinar. And if we run out of time, we'll provide a follow-up. In addition, we will have a couple polls during the webinar and some general discussion. It's a free-flowing conversational forum today, so we look forward to hopefully providing you some informative and helpful information as we all try to deal with this new normal. So with that, today you'll have the following individuals on the call. We'll have Rob Poland, our CEO of AutoScribe Corporation and Payment Vision, provide an intro, and then we'll turn it over to Lori Nelson, our Chief Compliance Officer and General Counsel for AutoScribe. And today I'll help moderate the discussion, Ryan Clark with Product Management from Payment Vision. So without further ado, let's turn it over to Rob for an intro.
Good morning, everybody. So since founding this company 31 years ago, we've never actually seen anything quite like this. Pandemic that kind of has such widespread effects. We've kind of been looking at our client base overall, and for the most part, we've seen some dips collectively in overall client activity, but for the most part, most of our clients, most of you guys seem to be doing relatively okay. We are going to start publishing actually the just to help you guys and to set a benchmark of what we're seeing collectively overall on client experience, and you can kind of start matching it up to how that applies to your specific market and even to your specific region of the country. So we're working on that. We're all in this together, and if we can help our clients in any way, we're certainly going to do that. We've always wanted, at our company, we've always wanted to do the right thing for ourselves, for our compliance, for clients, for our compliance, and so that's why we went ahead and brought on Lori Nelson, our Chief Compliance Officer and General Counsel, who helps figure out what the right things are. In the case of applying for these loans, which are out there, for a while it was kind of very unsettled regulation, and we ourselves had to spend a long time figuring out. So we wanted to share with you what we've learned from that in the process, as we kind of power through this situation together. So, Lori, if you're going to go ahead and get us started, really appreciate turning it back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rob, and thank you guys for joining us and Ryan for setting this up to give us opportunity to put some information out there. I do have to start. So I am an attorney licensed in Florida and Tennessee, but I'm not your attorney. I am the attorney for AutoScribe. So we don't want to construe this as legal advice. This is really just for conversations, point of reference, things that we can, best practices and such that we can suggest to help you guys. But yes, it's a pleasure to be here. I love my company, AutoScribe and Payment Vision and Lions, and we're here to help. And that's hopefully what we'll do today.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So today we'll look to cover a few things. And those are specifically, we want to look at different regulatory considerations, card associated rules and considerations around those card association rules, any financial considerations, as we alluded to earlier, around liquidity and lending assistance, and then any other considerations that may be out there. So let's go ahead and get started. I think everyone has noticed over the last month and a half that a lot of things have changed, and we've seen a lot of things change even from a regulatory perspective. As you're watching the environment, what's the most important things for folks to be considering?
Well, there's a lot to consider right now. We've kind of set aside 30 minutes today, so I can't go into too much detail with the individual ones. But as far as in the collection space, some of the more important aspects to look at is when can you or can you not collect too. So we've had some states like Massachusetts that actually put that 90-day ban on outbound calling. And then you have a state such as Nevada that I think it's until the 15th, they're prohibiting debt collection activity in whole. And then as recent as just 2 days ago on April 7th, DC actually put a restriction out for 60 days for outbound calling. So you need to pay a lot of attention of what's going on in your individual areas. And so above that, when you look at all the other states, more or less every state at this point has a shelter in place, act in place. So you have to ensure that when you guys have workers working remote, that they're set up accordingly and in compliance with that state's licensing and regulations. Now, the good news is that most states understand that there's not a lot that we can do to avoid this. So compliance is something that it's not a second thought, but it's somewhat of a second thought. You know, here, let's set you guys up remote. Oh, wait, we have to issue these branch licensing because even home offices require it. So there are a handful of states, for example, Connecticut, Idaho, Kansas, Oregon, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, and Nevada, that's proactive with this. And they know that these licensing requirements would require these licensing requirements. They're sending out emails. They're taking the information in different ways, and it's a time in this world that when you have a question for a state regulator, whereas before you might have been hesitant to do it, like you're telling on yourself, wait, do I need a license here? I don't want, now they'll realize we're unlicensed. This is the time to call. They're working with you. They want to know, and they'll be appreciative that you're trying to be compliant. So there's a lot of resources out there in addition to the state regulatory agencies themselves, such as the nationwide multi-state licensing registry, which NMLS has a COVID page dedicated to resources. The Conference of State Bank Supervisors has a webpage dedicated to this as well. North American Collection Agency Regulatory Association has done a great job keeping up-to-date information and providing resources to everybody. So it's state-specific, it's city-specific, it's region. It completely depends on where you are located and where you work. And 9.9 out of 10 probably have some sort of change if it's just a shelter in place or if it's a restriction itself on the activity.
Oh, okay. So you brought up a couple things. I think when I read the headlines first and I heard Massachusetts no longer allows collections, or DC, you know, as a payments company, I started to get concerned. What does that mean for us? Could you talk a little bit more, like alleviate some of the stress from that? You know, what do we need to be thinking about? We can still collect payments.
Yeah.
How do we do it safely?
In the instance of Massachusetts, if we're taking that one as an example, this is the unsolicited calls, these outbound calls. That's what it's prohibiting. It does also prohibit new lawsuits and things like that, but it's not prohibiting people taking payments and doing things. It's not prohibiting you keeping your active web page that shows these clients how to maintain their payment plan. If anything, this is the time that you not only need to put that in there, but also information for them to reach out to you if they need to adjust a payment plan, if they want to set up a payment plan. I mean, one of the things that's happening today is a lot of people are going to start receiving those stimulus checks. Mm-hmm. This may be a time where they want to reach out to you to settle that. You know, they actually may not have been affected as much as somebody else, and now they have a little bit of extra funds to actually make that payment on that debt and put that aside and kind of clear that up during this time. So it's not, in most cases, even when you have these types of regulations in place, it's the outbound calling that they're trying to avoid. Every other, you know, your normal day-to-day payment transactions can still continue.
Awesome, that's great. The other thing you mentioned was we're now in this new normal where we have a lot of folks working from home, very distributed workforce, and you mentioned licensing and the ability to collect. One of the things that we've been talking about is working from home, or how do you maintain that? What do folks need to be thinking about with collectors at home or agents at home trying to help their company maintain liquidity, capture payments? What's some things we need to consider?
Yeah, so even with all of these different things going and put in place, you set up these remote workers. PCI compliance is not something that you should be don't take serious during this time. That's not something where you want to see flexibility. PCI compliant is what keeps everybody secure. That keeps the information secure. And if you don't concentrate on that, what you'll see is people getting into your data, and you have data breaches and whatnot, and you're going to have a lot of fraud going on. So anytime you're setting anybody up at home, you have to ensure that, for one, that the multi-factor authentication's in place. A really best practice with at-home workers, even if they're able to make outbound calling, would be more to push them to an IVR solution. So they could talk, and then they could actually have the IVR solution be what takes the payment, or a web solution, and kind of point them into the automated functions that you have in place to avoid that call, for that center to actually find themselves out of PCI compliance because that remote employee was not set up correctly, or that remote employee decides to write down credit card numbers on pieces of paper as they're talking.
Violation of your CONDACT policies. Right?
Correct. I mean, so all those policies are still in place. So this is really the time to concentrate on your self-service channels as a way to stay compliant.
Awesome. Thank you for that. What I'd like to do is take a quick pause and get some feedback from the audience. We're going to post a poll here in just a second, and we'd love to get your response. We'll take about 30 seconds for everyone to be able to respond. All right. I want to thank each of you for your response. It's pretty interesting. So 38% said financial was their largest concern, 31% operational, and 23% legal and regulatory from a top three. Could we talk a little bit about financial? What options are out there in the market for our clients to help them from a liquidity and financial perspective?
Yeah, the good news is that people are paying attention, and they know small businesses today need help to make it through this. These programs I'm sure you've heard about. We'll touch briefly on them. If you guys, I know, again, we have 30 minutes, and Ryan can provide my contact information if anybody wants to reach out to me separately, because as Rob mentioned at the beginning, we really dug into this. We dug in this as soon as the act was out. We read it line by line. As soon as SBA provided more guidance, we got it out. We tried to understand it. And even the SBA guidance is still changing day to day of what they're providing to the lenders. So first, the EIDL loan advance. This is something that you can actually apply through on the state SBA's webpage, $10,000 grant for small businesses. If you need additional funds right now, this is something you definitely need to look into. The PPP, or the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, this is the one, even the press conferences have hit loan lately. It's kind of been chaos. So it came out, and the guidance was, you can actually get up to 2.5 of your salary, and how it was calculated has changed a little bit. At this point, the understanding is up to 100,000 net payroll cost per employee times 2.5 is your loan amount.
Okay.
So from that, it's interest-free for 6 months. And then after that, if you spend the money on the things that you're supposed to spend it on, your payroll, and up to 25% even in some additional items, it's forgiven.
Okay.
It's an excellent source. Yes. And so the banks right now have been flooded. It's one of those, you may want to look at your home bank first, especially if they're already an SBA certified lender, and see if they can help, or really just find the banks that have figured it out. And look at those ones that understand SBA, because they have to get the SBA number, then they have to, SBA is having different restrictions now. So you have to fund within 5 days. Now it's fund within 10 days. Now we need this documentation. SBA just recently posted the note today, or what note they needed to have in place. So they actually said, don't fund it yet. So the lenders have the note, the promissory note.
Okay.
So SBA just issued it.
Okay.
So I mean, it's everybody's on that curve of trying to get to where they need to be, and that's why the money's there. I mean, well, it's going, as we've heard, but they're going to put more money in there, and lenders do want to lend. Now, I will have to remind people too, as you're looking at options. So when the SBA is granting these funds, the liquidity of the bank is still, you have to take that into consideration.
Okay.
They have to put aside the funds to lend for this.
Okay.
So if they don't have the capital or bandwidth to do that, they may actually be limited on what they can offer. So keep that in mind too, as you're looking at different banks. And if you are working with a smaller bank, maybe ask the question, are you guys going to be able to do this? Yeah, that's a question to ask.
Okay.
In addition to that, they have the SBA Express Bridge Loan, SBA Debt Relief itself for the small businesses that are already in place. We also see a lot of different cities and states with specific state and city programs.
Okay.
I mean, there are really attractive things here locally where our office sits. There is a program that actually provides a $1,000 grant, interest-free up to 7 years, and then certain, different retention levels can equal the continued interest-free from 2 to 7, and even a 10% principal reduction. That's here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one example. And so I'm sure if you look at your city or your state, there may be other programs you can take advantage of. And not to be long-winded, but as we keep saying this, and so with all these things that you can take advantage of, one of the things that you have to remind yourselves is that the idea of like a cash advance in your credit card is not an option you should consider right now. And especially if you're somebody that's accepting credit cards, don't process your own credit card for a cash advance, because that is strictly prohibited and you could lose your ability to process cards. And that's not where you want to be right now. We're all kind of getting through this together. So you want to make sure that you keep everything in line with what you need to keep. And
so that was a lot of information.
I know.
So kind of a quick recap. One, SBA.
Yes.
SBA is our friend. There's a lot of local banks and banks partnering with us. Two, just like there's local regulation and state regulation being applied, there's also state and local assistance and very creative funding tools out there to help us. In our local area of Jacksonville, even the city is partnering with local banks to offer financial assistance and almost grant-like.
Oh, the first, yeah.
Yeah. And then the next thing is probably a great transition at this point. Let's talk about card association rules. Like, how are Visa and MasterCard handle this, and what should our clients be thinking about?
Yeah, so we have received a lot of different guidance from all card brands. And one of the things they're concentrating on is the known risk of chargebacks and returns during a financial crisis that something like this is created. The card brands have actually suggested work with the clients. Try to do everything you can to avoid it. Reminding you that if they request a refund and a chargeback at the same time, there is a way that you can actually get your money back from that. So don't be too worried about that. There is a process for that. You process a dispute response to that. And I'm sure that's going to happen from time to time here. So if you're canceling an event or something in your terms may actually give you the right, to still keep somebody on, even though you're not able to provide the service at the time, be proactive, reach out to them. If they don't want to wait, refund them at this point, or look at different options. Now, that said, you're still going to see a potential spike in chargebacks. Card brands are aware of that. They are, they're not saying we don't care, but what they're saying is they're not going to actively enforce the same chargeback monitoring as they did previously. If a little bit of a spike happens, they understand and will take the explanations. The same goes for banks with ACH returns. NACHA has their ACH return thresholds. If because of this, you're getting a lot of administrative and even the unauthorized, if people are trying to charge back on their ACH, these thresholds are not going to be enforced heavily during this time. They understand. They understand these things happen. Yes, they're going to give you best practices, be proactive, reach out. But the idea that you're going to lose a processing relationship because of a spike that was out of your control because of this, that's not what they're going to do. They're not trying to do that.
So how should clients handle that if they start to see spikes in either chargebacks or return rates? What's the best practice to work with their bank and their processors to make sure they maintain that positive relationship?
Well, be proactive. Be proactive and reach out to your banks and your issuers. Let them know that you see this issue. Always, when you receive a chargeback from one client, make sure that you don't continue to process a payment plan from that client. Things like that, little things that you can always do and monitor what you see come in and come out to make sure that you limit your exposure as much as possible.
I'd like to open it up to any questions that are out there, so please feel free to type any questions in and send them over to us. We do appreciate that. One question that came in was earlier we discussed, it started to go down the road of operational readiness for this response, work from home. You mentioned a couple activities you could do to help reduce your PCI compliance risk in a distributed workforce. Could you go into a little bit more detail of how, what are some of the things they should think about?
Yeah, like I said, and I strongly recommend the best practice for this is really to ensure PCI is to direct them to the automated solutions. That way that all the information is kept secure. Encourage payment plans, especially when we look at these different states. Like I said, as early as just 2 days ago, DC sent out that new regulation for 60 days for outbound. So encourage payment plans. If you're still outbound calls and someone wants to, have that ability to set up a payment plan, make sure you do it. That way, when you don't have the ability to give them a call next month to remind them of the payment, you guys have something in place. So it's things like that you can do. Always remind your staff too, don't write down the credit card numbers if you do continue to take agent assisted. Make sure that those connections are the way they need to be, the authentication is in place, that everything is still the same way it would be in your office. But yeah, to me, best practice, IVR, web, things of that nature, you really need to have them in place if you don't, and continue to kind of push towards them.
Okay, great. Another question that came in was similar to one of the first conversations you had around state licensure and collection. What additional concerns or considerations do you have for a collection agent at a state-to-state level?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on state. So licensing is always different by state. Some, like New York was going to issue licensing, and they've actually postponed that, so they don't have to worry about that right now. But in Connecticut, where you actually have to submit branch things, they're actually taking a spreadsheet and putting it in there. It's just being proactive. It's whoever is doing your compliance and handles that licensing cannot ignore the idea that you're putting people in remote situations where the actual terms of the statute requires licensing for those remote situations. You may have thought, well, this is only going to be a week. Is it really worth it? Well, it's more than a week now. So it's really time to focus and make sure that ongoing, you're not going to have to worry about getting penalized for that later on. Now, again, as long as you use your good, in good faith, you're taking measures and doing things to keep yourself compliant, I don't feel as if you're going to see any kind of penalty. Now, if you ignore it week after week and just continue, well, I don't know how the state's going to look at that, when they do come to see that and happen.
So again, key term here is proactive. Like,
yes.
If you have a question, if you have a concern, reach out and talk to folks.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to talk to the regulators. They're your
correct.
They can be your friends if you proactively work with them.
They can, and you can email. I know phone lines may be crazy right now. Email, and the states are doing a great job of publishing information on their web pages. They really are, and like I mentioned, a couple of different sources. There's a lot of sources that are trying to combine the information so people can easily access it. I mean, there's a lot of ways to find out. If anybody, again, has any issues with particular states or questions, feel free we can try to assist you. We're all in this together. We're here to help, and we hope that we can help, but it's really just trying to find the information and where it's at.
Awesome. We just had a question roll in. Are debt collection regulations generally for third-party collection agencies, or do they ban any outbound collections, also including first-party collectors such as auto finance companies?
Yeah, generally it's debt collection agencies. So first-party collection, with the exception of Nevada, I think Nevada is pretty specific in just any collections themselves. But then you have DC's that recent, it actually specifies first-party collection is not covered. Massachusetts, not first-party collections. These are the third-party suits. Now, Nevada does also specify if you're licensed under there, which would tell me that a creditor would not be licensed as a collection agency, so they can proceed to actually make those outbound calls.
Okay, thank you. Another question that was asked was, is there a place where you can get a comprehensive list of which states have changed their collection procedures?
Well, they're all changing. So right now, I think the best source potentially for that I found was that NACARA site, the North American Collection Agency Regulatory Association is what it's called. They're doing a pretty good job of keeping things in line. I don't, if your state licensing is through the NMLS for collection agencies, that's a great place to go because that's where a lot of the licensing stuff happens, and they're doing, their best to keep all the information up to date there.
And it looks like I got one more question. Sorry, just working through the questions here. I do appreciate this. That auto finance collection. Okay, I think we covered them. I think we had two very similar questions there. Awesome. Any closing thoughts as we leave today? You talked a lot about changing regulation, how to manage in a distributed workforce, highlighted some of the considerations from association operating rules and knowledge requirements, and then we touched on some ways to find funding and liquidity. Any other closing thoughts or considerations for our?
Well, one thing I forgot to mention when we were talking about the financial programs out there, specifically on the PPP, is a reminder to everybody that took immediate action, really for their employees, kind of to furlough them, give them the opportunity to collect unemployment. You can correct that at this point. You're still eligible to do that. So if you actually were to go apply for the loan and actually receive the loan to kind of work towards the forgiveness piece of it by the retention, you can actually rehire them. If you rehire them and then use those funds, then all they'd have to do is notify the state that they're employed again, the unemployment would cease, but you'd be able to actually put them in your payroll and get them going. I mean, if that's the situation that you're in, because you may have just let go some of them and tried to crunch in, but you realize you could still use them when it gets there. So it's definitely something that you need to consider, even if you did, already go through the process of furloughing.
It's a great point to highlight, right? It's not too late. We can still help each other. The funding's out there, the liquidity's out there, and you still help your employees that you furloughed.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's great news. All right. Well, I really appreciate your time. Rob, do you have any closing thoughts or comments from your side? I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to just share a little bit. When so on the EIDL loans that talked about originally, I just want to clarify that the max cap is $2 million, and what the $10,000 is kind of an advance that as soon as you apply for the loan, there's a little box at the end, and you can check it, and it says, do you want a $10,000 advance? Check the box, because the loan will generally be approved within a couple of the $10,000 advance part will be approved quickly, and it will fund your account, and then the other part of the loan, that's going to take some time to provide supporting documentation. You won't get that quickly, but at least you'll get the $10,000 part. And as I understand it, that does not have to get repaid, so there's absolutely no downside to doing that. Most of you guys are probably familiar with on the SBA loans, that there's a large chunk of it is forgiven. And as Lori mentioned, it kind of depends on what the picture looked like. I think the cutoff date is before February 15th and after. So how many actual staff you have on there. So pay attention to that. And if you guys have any questions, again, Lori's not your personal attorney, or your company's attorney, but she can kind of guide you to what's out there, and for how that might be able to help you. And finally, you all can reach out to me if you have any questions you want to talk about that. You full access to me. Ryan will make sure off the site that there's a way you can get me. And I'll just tell you my email is rpaul@autoscribe.com as we power through this, and I'll go through this together. I really want to thank you guys for being our clients. We're doing the very, very best we can for you. Because our workforce today is distributed, and we've kind of gotten in the habit of people working from home, even though we all generally report to offices. Most of us have operate under a program where we have people have been working from home like 1 or 2 days a week. That's made it very kind of easy for us to transition to this model. I know we've gotten a lot of requests for people trying to activate some of our self-serve capture channels so people can make payments. Our debt negotiation program, our automated program that uses a form of double-blind bidding is a good way to address compliance and to kind of keep the agency running, even if you don't have people there to answer the phone and talk about them. So we're implementing these things as quickly as we can. We've been very, very busy lately in this regard. I want to thank you guys just for being our customers, and really appreciate your business, and we're working hard for it. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Rob. We appreciate everyone's time today. Again, I would echo the sentiments that Rob has shared with us to make sure we're thinking about this and making sure we're taking care of folks. It's we're all in this together, and it's about flattening the curve and make sure we're safe and here tomorrow to be successful. So we're in this together. You will notice we will be putting on a series of webinars to help as we navigate this, and we do have a white paper that will lead to our next webinar about helping businesses maintain continuity through the response, and specifically work on how you can set up the right self-service and digital capabilities to maintain your business for the long run. We appreciate everyone's time and look forward to talking with you after this webinar. Have a great day.